Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Jeff Holman. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, thanks for having me.
Excited for the conversation. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
I can. I'll be brief, though, to save us some time. I kind of combine my engineering background, legal background, and an MBA to run a small law firm focused on startups and scale-ups. And we do it in a unique way where we offer services to small businesses in a fractional legal team model. Really, the emphasis is to align what we do with our clients so they get the right expertise from the right attorney at the right time. And I appreciate you having me on the show because I think a few years back, I've run different variations of my law firm for a couple variations since about 2006. As I look back, I'm not sure that I did it right the first time. And I went in-house and I did this other stuff. And I didn't know that I was going to run my law firm again when I went in-house, as an employee. But after being in-house and realizing how to run a business so it really aligns with our clients, I came back out. And that's when I really started thinking about how do I integrate the profit component into a law firm? Because most law firms don't do that, and we can chat about that. But it's an interesting place to be when you're in a professional service business and you realize, oh wait, my business should have a profit component to it too.
Purpose of business is to make money.
Oh,
I know
that.
some people struggle with that. No, but some people struggle with that. And it's like, if you don't make money, you can't pay the bills. You can't hire the people. You can't do the marketing. You can't handle any of that. And you still need to be profitable, because if you're going to take the risk and put the time in, you deserve to be rewarded.
I totally agree. And so many attorneys make good money usually, but their businesses aren't always profitable. That's the real distinction. Running a business that isn't profitable, because I have an IP background for, intellectual property, patents, trademarks. How do you create value in these intangible assets? And as I've looked at it over the years, I'm like, why don't, and I counsel this to clients. I'm like, why are you spending time building this business if all you're going to do is take a paycheck from it and run it like it's a job? You're doing the business anyways. You've been doing it for 5 years or 10 years. You're going to do it for another 10 or 15 years. Why not make the business worth something too, in addition to taking a salary from it in the meantime? So I don't know that a lot of attorneys have adapted that. They're looking for the next job and they're looking to fill their schedule with hours and they want a paycheck coming in and they, buy what they buy with their money.
The dreaded trap, right? Time for money.
That's exactly what it is.
So how did you learn about profit first?
I read the book and I went and listened to some podcasts at one point and I'm like, why am I not doing this in my business? But it's hard because you go, okay, I have all these expenses. I just talked to my wife today. She helps run she runs all the operations of the law firm. Let me be totally clear about that. And I was talking, we were reminiscing about, you remember in 2007 when you went on your own for the very first time and you hired your first employee, and she went out and, at the time bought $700 or $800 in office supplies because she's like, I need paper clips. And she got back and I'm like, to me at that point in time, I was like, $700 on office. I don't even have like a bookshelf to store all those office supplies. Why would you spend all the money? It was so focused on how do I take home money and how do I not spend money that I wasn't even thinking about it in a profit from a profit standpoint. So when I don't remember when Profit First, the book or the podcast and all that stuff started coming out, but when I first heard it, I'm like, why have I approached this backwards for so long? So,
and I'm assuming it's helped you.
Oh yeah, yes. Honestly, it's been. I don't know if I've been strict implementer with the profit first model, but it's really directed what I've done the last 5 years, where I said, okay, after being in-house, coming back out on my own, I was actually excited to restart my firm for a lot of reasons. And as I did that, I said, well, how do I structure this more so it feels a lot more like a business that will have its own value someday, as opposed to a law firm where we just drain the value out every single month or year or whatever it is, because we just want all the take-home pay from that and none of the real growth or business enterprise value. So it's driven how I've structured my team. It's driven how I've structured the compensation in the firm. It's driven how we build clients. It's really a central component to how we operate.
And I think you made a key distinction. Everyone thinks it's about the 5 bank accounts. It's not. That's just how you move the money. It's how you rethink the way you look at your business and how you think about money. That's really where the gold is. And that's really where you have to focus. But I think too often people focus on the bank accounts instead of the bigger picture. How do I build a business that consistently puts off cash, excess cash to what we need, and that we can build reserves and do all of that?
Yeah. And now try to convince other attorneys and legal staff that we're going to build a business and profit comes out first. That is not the mentality they're used to.
We're going to be doing an episode, Profit First for Lawyers, coming up soon. So we'll hit that topic.
Awesome.
One of the things that I am looking forward to is that you align the legal strategy with the business strategy. And what I have found too often is that most business owners chase shiny objects. They don't know why they picked an entity. They don't know why they structured things the way they did. The CPA says one thing. They never bothered to talk to the attorney. Their buddy did this, so they did that.
Or AI suggested it these days.
Or AI suggested it. You have to be careful with what questions you ask AI, because I just saw this. It was an attorney. He's like, I'm getting a little upset lately because I send these contracts out and the opposing counsel puts it through AI and sends me back the suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, they don't bother to look at it. And he goes, my clients don't complain because they never bothered to tell it that they were on the other side of the contract. So all of the adjustments are to our favor.
Yes, I've seen that sometimes. It's like, well, if that's what you want. Yes, I've seen attorneys do the same thing who aren't really engaged in their clients' work as deeply as they should be.
So how do you align legal strategy with business strategy?
I think there's probably two things that we do differently and very intentionally with our clients. One isn't really even about how we're structured as a fractional legal team, so much as approaching the whole conversation with our clients around their business strategy. And for me, this came about, not to dig into the history of it too much, but I was out there writing patents for IBM and Intel and companies like that. And I felt like, every time I do this, I'd be like, how does this patent fit into this portfolio of tens of thousands of patents these guys already have? And that was kind of this maybe philosophical question. But when I had a small client, like, for example, today we have a client I just read on LinkedIn that he launched his first product today. And so it's a new bag, and he's, we helped him. In this case, we helped him with his trademarks and some other stuff. And it's super exciting. But for a client like that, as opposed to maybe an IBM, his trademark, his one trademark, or his one, somebody's one patent, that is their business. And so it may be one thing to draft a patent to put into the arsenal for IBM, but it's a totally different thing to draft the patent or get the trademark for this small startup client who's relying on that asset for their business. And so it really led me down this whole path of, what is IP strategy, which really led me to understand that IP strategy is just one branch of business strategy generally, right? Just like marketing strategy is a branch of business strategy. So you really have to understand what is your business strategy. And so we spent a lot of time and do spend a lot of time with clients on initial strategy calls where we want to understand what is your strategy, because it's only at that point where we can then say, let's align and stage out the legal steps that you'll need that go along with that strategy. Because if we don't know the strategy, then we don't know the legal steps. And if we don't know the right legal steps, we can't think ahead and stage the costs that are going to come along with those legal steps. So that's a really 30,000-foot view of how we approach things from a business strategy standpoint.
And so when you're talking business strategy, would it be, let's say an entrepreneur comes to you and goes, hey, my goal for this company is to sell it in 10 years versus my goal for this company is to list it and go public and become stockholders, or my goal is to eventually hand it down to my kids. I'm assuming they all have different legal strategies and entity structures, or are you talking beyond that too?
Well, I think so the business goals are very important. That's what the people are working towards. When we're talking about helping with the legal strategy, I actually am talking about something just slightly different. Not that those don't play into it, because they absolutely do. But when I'm talking about business strategy, there are 5 parts in my model that I use, and I've tried to make it something really easy. And that is, you have to have a plan to deploy valuable resources, which might be money, team, IP, whatever. A plan to deploy valuable resources, toward a business leadership objective. And I think a lot of people miss that, for a sustainable advantage in a competitive environment. And so what you described, I wouldn't necessarily call a strategy, because that's just a goal or an objective. To be a strategy for the business overall, you want to say, well, what is the competitive environment I'm in? What is the advantage I'm trying to create that I can sustain in that environment? Those aren't really new to strategy conversations. But the one that I think a lot of people miss is, why am I creating this sustainable advantage? It's so I can have a leadership place in the environment. So leadership usually comes down to one of two things. It's either market leader or a price leader, right? You're either cutting costs so you can undercut everybody and still make money, and they can't. Or, I mean, it's a legitimate path.
I don't like to race to the bottom.
I don't either. And I haven't designed my business that way. It always works for one company in the industry, right? It's just all the other.
One.
Exactly. The rest should be more market, what I've termed market leaders, right? You're saying, how do I become the Apple instead of the Walmart? How do I figure out how to build a brand? Again, going back to what we talked about before, how do I build not only a service I can deliver, but how do I build a brand around that where people come and find me, they come and pay me more, they want me to do it instead of somebody else who does it differently. So that to me really creates the foundational framework that we can use to then say, okay, now I really understand your business. I know you want to raise money, you want to pass this to your kids, or you want to, exit in 5 or 10 years, or whatever that objective is. But how are we going to get to that objective for you? That's the strategy. And we need to know your strategy so we can then, like I said, map out the legal tactics or the legal stages that go along with the steps for your own strategy.
So what would some of those legal steps look like to align with business strategy? Because I'm not sure everyone would have clarity on that.
Yeah, for a lot of them will be common to businesses. You mentioned before starting, when do I pick an entity and form my entity? That's usually one of the first stages. When do I start hiring a team? Do I bring on investors? Am I designing new products or creating a new brand that I need to protect? Am I forming strategic partnerships with people? Am I doing other things in the market, sourcing things in a particular way or from particular suppliers to build advantage? And so if you look at it, they're not necessarily different. As I've looked at it, even for my law firm, right? I run my law firm. I have partners, I have suppliers, I have not the traditional like manufacturing suppliers, but I have legal vendors that I use. I have software that I use, some people that I have strategic referral relationships with. All of those are just different variations than what, say, my e-commerce or SaaS clients would have, or even I'm thinking of a client who does a lot of logistics and manufacturing management for e-commerce companies. Like we're all just versions of the same business. It's just my version is a little different because I'm a professional service business than somebody who's making hard goods. But the components, the basic component parts are the same for the most part. And that might be oversimplifying it, but I think in a way, by recognizing how similar all of our businesses are, it makes it easier to then apply these principles and come up with a roadmap, right? A legal roadmap for a company. So you're going to step through those things that I mentioned. Now you're probably going to have your own angle. You're going to have the Rocky way to do it, and I'm going to have the Jeff way to do it. And my way might rely more heavily on certain assets that I have. Maybe my background's different than yours. Maybe you have some things in your background or your network or your skill set that's different from mine. But really, we want to understand the general framework. Then we want to understand how it applies specifically to your situation, and then we're going to do that. Set the legal things in place. Now, the reason we do that, and I want to emphasize this quite a bit because this is huge. The reason that we want to have a legal roadmap isn't because we just say, oh, you're going to raise money, you need to get documents in place to raise money. We want to actually help our clients stage up to those steps, right? So if you're going to raise money in the next 12 to 18 months, let's say, there are things that you can do today that will save you so much time and energy and potentially cost and potentially mistakes, that by doing them today, by knowing about them today, you're in a much better position than if you wait 12 to 18 months and you go to an attorney and you say, okay, I'm ready to raise money, and I found an investor, he wants to invest, let's just do this. So we want to be able to work up towards those steps, not just know that they're there. Excuse me.
And being ahead of it and preparing for it so that when the time comes, you're ready. Because I think that's the biggest thing that I notice. Owners are always behind the eight ball whenever it comes to filling out the bank applications or loan applications or other
Oh yeah.
things, and their legal paperwork is not where it should be. Their operating agreement may not be necessarily up to date and so forth, or properly written to secure everybody's appropriate needs and so forth. I think a lot of times in the beginning, you just get started and you don't actually think of the possible bad outcomes that will happen over time. Do you get involved much with the operating agreement and helping set up the partnership and
Oh
how
yeah.
it should be structured?
Very much so. I've got a friend, actually, a good friend I play tennis with. He's been calling me recently, he's getting the friend advice, right? And I'm like, okay, this is twice as expensive as the non-friend advice, so the normal market rate. But we're having that conversation. He's telling me about where he's going with his business, the type of business it is, who his partner is, what that they've got some investors lined up and where their target investment dollar is. And I'm like, okay, here are the things you need, right? We're having the right conversations at the right time. He's one of the most thorough guys I know. So he's asking a lot of questions. A lot of my answers are, hey, this is a great question. We've got it covered in your operating agreement. This is a great question. It's covered in your operating agreement. But for your situation, we might want to tweak it a little bit because you mentioned XYZ. And so, yeah, we totally have that conversation with people, help them get started on the right foot. And that is, especially in today's world where you hear we got this long history of, I'm going to raise VC money. I'm going to be a unicorn. I'm going to grow huge, fast, sell a bunch of stuff, and maybe put the business pieces in place later. That's been so popular, but there's such a shift towards bootstrapping now. And the models and the legal steps that you would take for a bootstrapping company versus a fast growth VC backed, unicorn type of company, they're different. I'm actually in the middle of trying to put an article together about this because, I think of it as building a tower, right? Your company is a tower of some sort. In the VC model, you build the tallest tower you can build as fast as possible. And if it works, you'll go put the pieces in place later to kind of shore it up and, strengthen the foundation. But no, seriously, because if it doesn't work, guess what? That's totally fine in the VC world, because the VC world is either unicorn or kill it, right? And so it doesn't matter if it has that strong of a foundation in a sense, because if it doesn't make it anyways, which most of them don't, you didn't need to incur all the costs and resources to build that strong foundation for this super tall tower. Whereas a bootstrap company, you're building a tower, but you're building it, you want it to be profitable. You want, profit first, right? You want profit is your focus, not users or some other non-profit metric. And so you're building it more slowly. You're really testing out your product. You're testing out your market. And the third leg in that stool, I think, is the freedom to operate your company, which is having the financial and the legal kind of clarity and the pieces in place so that you have a strong foundation from the beginning. You're going to build that tower slower. You need it to stay up. You can't let that fall down, because the goal of a bootstrap company is a solid financial company, not a unicorn, or we let it burn down and it doesn't matter anyways.
And I think most VC-backed companies have about a 10% success rate. So 9 out of 10 are going away.
If even that, yeah.
So
might be 2%.
Well, but I think people need to realize that, because they think VC money is the answer. Selling out to private equity is fine as long as they write you a big check and you get to leave. That seems to be the thing these days. But even that is constantly shifting, and where and what they're buying is constantly shifting. It seems to be crazy. Everybody seems to follow the tide, and wherever the tide goes, they go. So
Yeah.
it is. I like a good bootstrap company that has longevity and puts out lots and lots of profit. That for me is far more dependable and far more apt to make it and survive and be good over time.
Yeah. And if we're all candid with ourselves, that's better for founders overall anyways. I mean, there are a couple founders in these unicorns who make out really well. But even in the unicorns, the successful cases with VC-backed companies, a lot of the founders don't leave with anything other than the paycheck they received for the last 8 years, right? They've been diluted down to nothing, and they walk away saying, well, that was a good experience. I wish I'd made some money off of it in addition to a salary. And because they don't, right? So other people do, but a lot of times the founders don't.
Jobs and Musk have both been fired. Luckily, they got to get back in, but not everyone has that luck. In most smaller businesses, you don't get a second chance.
Yeah.
Once you're gone, and you'll have to figure something else out.
Yeah. Although I will say a lot of the small business owners are so resilient. I mean, it's a personality trait, right? People, they're drawn to it. And if they weren't really drawn to it the way that they are, I don't think people would do it as much as they do. It's a tough row, right? There's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of benefits, maybe non-monetary sometimes benefits to being a small business owner.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons I like Profit First is I find most of these people don't have guardrails, and they don't have guardrails with money. So when you use Profit First, it gives you guardrails. Now, some of you drive right through the guardrails and keep going. Okay, but they're there to tell you something. To kind of going back to what you said at the beginning, rethink about the way you look at your business. If your business is supposed to be profitable, how do we build a business that is, instead of just investing money and hoping for the best tomorrow and seeing what'll happen, or blowing it up by going through the guardrails constantly and not having that fiscal responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a small business owner myself, right, I run into this and it's like, well, where am I going to put my marketing budget? I might not know exactly the best place to put it with the best ROI, but I at least know what my marketing budget is. And I know if I'm going to blow through that marketing budget, right? Or if I'm going to be under the marketing budget. That's the guardrail. And that really guides decisions way more than just, should I sponsor this golf tournament because a buddy contacted me and said I should sponsor it? So.
And I think marketing is one of the hardest spends out there because most people don't have the metrics to tie it back to say, did it work? Did it not work? And they don't measure that. Or the client comes in, they don't even ask how you found us. And the client's like, I don't know. I saw you here. I saw you there. So which part of the marketing is actually working and which part isn't? But that is a very big thing that we all want to do is if we're going to spend on marketing, I'd really love to know, even if it's not a perfect answer, but a pretty good answer, which marketing dollars work. I'm going to guess that unless your potential client's on that golf course and you're golfing with them, the golf tournament probably won't give you a great return.
Yeah, I'd love to support it for other reasons, but I have not pulled the trigger for marketing purposes.
And, sometimes you just have to support a friend and write a check, and that's a whole different story, and that's okay. Yep. I get that, and that's fair too. So let's talk about, you built your business as a fractional legal team. Can you explain to us why that's helpful for a business owner to hire a fractional legal team?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons, but let me focus on just one or two here. The idea of a fractional legal team to some people sounds a lot like a law firm, right? Well, can I just go to my law firm and get all that same services from a law firm when I need them? And the answer is yes, maybe for the right law firm, but usually not, because law firms are just run with gatekeepers, partners who leverage associates. They push the work down. You don't know who's doing the work, all this stuff. And you don't know what the bill is going to be, unfortunately. You start, you're like, oh, we need $5,000 retainer, but your bill at the end of the month is $16,000. Like, what? Explain that to me again. And so what we've done is I started with the thought that, because I've been in-house, I know what the executive teams of these companies need. I know how fast they need it. I know what level of detail I want. And so I said, let's just build it as if we were down the hall from the executive team. We're the legal team. We sit in the wing or the offices, wherever. And we want it to be, first of all, predictable costs. What would it be like if we were all on salaries? Or maybe we are just all on fractional salaries. So we want to be predictable costs for people. Number two, we want to have access to a lot of different people for two reasons. One, we want to have the right people with the right expertise available for a specific project. You don't want to call your patent attorney, which I love patent attorneys because I am one, but you don't want to call your patent attorney necessarily with an SEC question, right? Or vice versa. So you want to have the right expertise available when you need it. And we all know nobody likes hiring an attorney. So why would you want to hire two attorneys if you had to hire two attorneys, right? So we save the hassle of having to hire down to a one-time hire because you get our whole team with that. So the predictability, the hiring. And also, the last thing I'd say is just bottlenecking, right? In addition to the gatekeeping that I mentioned earlier, bottlenecking is tough. If you can only afford one attorney in your business, and I see a lot of job posts out there, first legal hire for this new startup, exciting role, which is great, but that one legal hire probably has to hire out a bunch of other stuff anyways because they don't do it all. And even if they do it, sometimes they're so busy with all the other urgent projects, they have to still hire it out because they're a bottleneck for the projects that need to get done fast. So there's this bottlenecking aspect to having a single attorney. So just having this fractional legal team really addresses, to a very large extent, a lot of these different problems with hiring attorneys. And I mentioned to you this before the call, but I'm still trying to figure out the reasoning behind the way our industry as attorneys approaches offering our services to people. We're supposed to be these great communicators. And what we've done is we've communicated so well to our clients that we don't actually want you to hire us because we don't want you to call us. We don't want you to tell us what the problems are that we could then solve for you, because we put this time blockade on every single phone call. Oh, I have to call you and you got to, or we say, I need a retainer of $5,000 before I'll talk to you about whatever problem you have. So we've made it impossible for people to hire us. And it's, again, going back to business strategy, that seems like that's a dumb move, if I can put it really bluntly.
So we built our business strategy on the exact opposite of the legal strategy. There is no
good
clock.
First move.
There is no time. Unlimited access. You pay a flat monthly. And I did it because I knew that if a business owner had a thought and he's like, oh, I got to go pick up the phone and pay hundreds of dollars to have this conversation, they're not going to pick up the phone. And I'm like, you know how much harder it is for me to fix your mistake than to prevent it?
Mm-hmm.
And so we just removed all the friction of working together so that they just pick up the phone and they ask the question. And this way things get done right at the beginning and it works out well. The problem is I can't always show the value of how I saved you, 20,000 this month, 50,000 this month, 200,000 this month from that crazy idea of yours that when we penciled out the numbers, you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. I know. That's why we do this, so that you don't make those mistakes.
I think I found that is a difficulty. You're trying to prove the absence of something because that's something, that bad thing didn't happen, right? And I think it's fair in our types of industries that we point that out to people. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, you remember last week when I saved you guys $1 million because you started to do this thing and I told you you're going to get sued immediately by that celebrity? Yeah, that was probably $1 million mistake that I saved you from. I don't have any shame about saying that, right? Because otherwise, and it's not self-promotion as much as it is, people just don't know what triggers to look for with legal issues and financial issues. They don't always see that there could be problems around the corner. You and I, we know that. We've seen it before. Like, we know what problems are coming up. We can see around those corners because this is the 100th time we've seen that same corner. Different client, but same corner. And so we really have to, it's a service to our clients to be able to say, this is what's coming around that corner. I've seen it before. And that last corner, if you remember that last corner that I looked around for you and we didn't have that problem that you could have had, or the one that I told you was coming up and you didn't really want to do it the way I said. So you had the problem and then we had to solve it afterwards. Like, I think clients need to know and be reminded that, we do see around corners. We've seen around those corners.
And that definitely makes a lot of sense. Do it right the first time. I think people want to make life hard. Business should be easy. Let's make business easy. Why do we always want to make things more difficult than they are? And I think there's some part of human nature that wants a complex solution instead of just an elegantly simple way of doing things.
Yeah, it might be like my now 15-year-old. He turned 15. He's my youngest. Last week he turned 15. And I said to him, hey, have you raised 3 other kids and been through this issue 3 times before. He's trying it for the tennis team, and he wants to do a certain thing. And I'm like, have you raised 3 kids? Have you taken them through high school sporting teams and coaches 3 times before? No. I'm like, of course you haven't. You're my 4th. I've done this 3 times. I have the answers. I can help you through this situation, trying to make the team and get on the varsity and all that. Like I know some of the things that need to happen that you just haven't been down that road. So you haven't seen it before, but I have. So let me help you out. And he's like, okay. I feel like we're a lot of us are that same way. We're like, there's joy in kind of creating your own solution. Doesn't mean you're going to do it right though. And so maybe you want to have a little help along the way. And that's where, you and I have to remove the barriers as much as possible. So I love that you're making it easy for people to call you, discuss their issues, right? The legal industry needs to get way better at that. But by doing that, we need to make it easier for people to come to us so that we can help them see around those corners.
Yeah, I don't find much joy in failure, but that's just me. And I've talked to attorneys about this before, and nobody talks about kind of the elephant in the room. If you're paid a flat rate every month, you will build out the most efficient law practice out there. If you're paid by the hour, you will build the most inefficient law practice out there because there's no incentive for you to be efficient. And that's really what the key is you have to have alignment in how people are paid, in how you want them to behave. And that's why I love this whole way of doing things, because I can tell you every single year we look at our processes and our systems, and we just did it again because it's, a lot of it happens for us at the beginning of the year when we have to roll everything over. We're like, okay, let's drop in all these new systems as we're doing that.
Part
and
of your traction process, right? I see the book behind you for traction.
Yes. And we constantly tweak it. So every year we're like, okay, we thought about all these things. Now that I've got to rebuild everyone's workbooks for the next year, I'm going to make them better, faster. I'm going to add features to them, and we're going to drop it across the entire way. But that's how we keep building value. And we do that because we know that's what you just have to do. But if I were paid by the hour, I'd probably spend 10 times more on each client.
If they've got the budget. The clients who don't have that budget fire you. And so you end up with a different problem. No profit.
Well, and again, that's why everyone should be in alignment. And that's really the key. Figure out how to get everyone rowing the boat in the same direction. If people would like to explore this further, learn more about you and your firm, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so people can find me there. It's just Jeff Holman. I say something about building fractional legal teams. It should be pretty obvious that it's me. The other thing we do is, like you guys, we'll do a free strategy call with potential clients. So we'll sit down for 30 minutes and we'll talk. What kind of things are you building? What kind of messes are you making? And what kind of cleanup might you need? And talk about their business strategy, so we can see if we can start to explore their legal strategy over the next 12 to 18 months. And we find that's a pretty good starting point to really explore a potential working relationship with people. So it's available, on my website, intellectualstrategies.com.
And it's always nice when your lawyer actually understands business.
It makes a big difference on my side too.
It makes a big, big difference. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Rocky. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to the entire unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. You can actually get the full podcast in audio only format here on YouTube or any other of your favorite podcast players. Don't forget to go check out episodes 1 through 13. They lay out the foundation of Profit First in the book and how to get started. In addition, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to check out. And if you remember to subscribe, you'll always be updated when we put a new one out every single week. Thanks for listening. Have a profitable week.